Aha.
Yay.
Thank you, Judy.
Good job, Judy.
No one has to answer that question now that we're recorded anyways. So this is our October meeting of the Dispute Resolution Committee, and we have checked in and checked to see if there's any public input, and there is none received and no guests attending. So we can move right into the agenda. And any discussion or corrections or amendments to the August 3rd meeting minutes from anybody?
Yes. So I just want to note that these are the most detailed minutes I have read in more than 40 years of reading minutes. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's a huge amount of work for staff to do. And it's also, I couldn't read the whole thing. I didn't have time to read the whole thing. I don't know whether anybody else read all of it. And it opens you up to amendments, like at one place, the word is good and it should have been go. I don't know whether staff wants to continue doing that greater detail, but I would encourage staff not to do it in that much detail, but instead to have descriptive terms like the committee members discuss blah, and then include any sort of decision that are made to do or not do something. That's a fairly general comment, and I don't know whether everybody agrees with me, but that was a lot.
No, I appreciate the time and energy. It felt like having it as almost a narrative of the meeting was a lot of effort and work, and would support having it in a more summarized version if helpful, because as you said, 12 pages of minutes is a bit. So appreciate it, because I know it was her first job, and it's much easier to have someone say, oh, less detail than more detail. So kudos for capturing everything you did, Judy, and appreciate that. And with that, no pieces on corrections or amendments besides the feedback. With that, do we have a motion to approve the August 3rd minutes?
So moved.
A second.
I'll second.
Great.
Angela.
And all in favor by aye or raising a hand? No. Great, so minutes are approved as presented. And so that takes us down to the legislative input, which is John and Alexandria. And last meeting, we had the recap of the great simple measure that was drafted for that, and other things you guys want to share and report.
Alexandra, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go?
I'll go ahead and go first, just because I think I really only have one item, and excuse me while I try to find it. It is not as easy to find things on Zoom as it is on just your normal files. But the 2022 draft report was submitted to the legislature. Thank you all for all of your comments on the 15th of September. I will go ahead and drop that final draft in the chat as soon as I can find it. And I think that's really it. So I'll turn it over to you, John.
Thanks. So whoever's controlling the screen, could you put up page 4 of the minutes? Right, yes, stop. Perfect, thank you. So I want to do two things. One, I want to talk about the LC draft. And then two, I want to talk about what I think I'm expected to do, which is talk about what we should expect for the 2023 legislative session. So I'm sorry that I wasn't here in August. I think, as Angela seems to know my whereabouts, I was in remote parts of Michigan, thankfully. And I didn't pay attention. I don't think I got a copy of this before seeing these minutes, which is fine. They can be amended up until the bill is dropped, which is a fancy term for meaning introduced. But there's a problem here. And the problem is that in the first and second paragraphs there's reference to mandatory mediation. And mandatory mediation was a big part of Senate Bill 586, but there's no sunset on the mandatory mediation. That is now a permanent part of, at least until the legislature repealed it, that's now a permanent part of the Oregon Residential Landlord and Tenant Act in ORS 90.767. So what currently has a sunset, as correctly noted in the last paragraph, are sections 9 and 10. 10 is the section that created this group, Dispute Resolution Advisory Committee. 9 is the section that created grants for legal representation. And that neither of those sections has explicitly to do with mandatory mediation. Certainly 9 does not. 9 has nothing to do with mediation, period. So I think the summary needs to be changed, including the relating to clause. So relating to clauses are extremely important because they control what can be in your bill. And if this bill got dropped with a relating to clause saying mandatory mediation, I'm not sure that we could amend or change the sunset on section 9 of the bill. Section 9 of the bill is the one about grants to persons to provide legal representation to low-income facility tenants in addressing disputes involving legal matters. So you may recall that the concept there was a 4-year period in which $100,000 of the money that MRC, whatever it is anymore, MCRC is what I remember it, but now it's marinas and manufactured communities. $100,000 a year for 4 years, and since it didn't start until 2.5 years into that 4-year period, the sunset would cut the pilot short. The concept was that both 9 and 10 would be extended in a bill to whatever that date was, 2027. 2027. So I can suggest some language, Alexandra. I don't have authority to talk to.
Yeah, and we can talk to LC about this. This was the language that they settled on to address what we wanted. And I thought I sent this to you, and you were off, so.
Yeah, I was off, and
yeah,
it could have gotten lost. I just looked through my emails and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I don't know.
And plus I changed email addresses a couple of years ago, and sometimes things get sent to the wrong one.
Oh goodness. And I'm having troubles just double checking just because of the format that this is the same as the version that I dropped into the chat. And I think it is, because the relating to clause is correct.
So the other thing I want to mention, and I told Rick this.
Rick and I changing the language for contracting.
Yeah. So without going through the whole sordid, frustrating history of this, Oregon Law Center, which is where I work, had difficulty with the way OHCS, and primarily I would say Department of Justice, the lawyers for OHCS, OHCS doesn't interpret the law, DOJ does. DOJ is the lawyers for the department and for every department of state government. And DOJ focused on the language in the bill that refers to legal representation. So I wrote that phrase, and so I know what I meant, but that doesn't matter what I meant to a judge. What matters to a judge is what the words say. And so the difficulty there is that legal representation, as understood by DOJ, means an actual lawyer-client relationship. So lawyer-client relationships are very technical. There's almost always a written agreement. There's confidentiality involved, regulated by Oregon State Bar, blah, 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 lots of stuff. And I had in mind, and I think the coalition had in mind when it approved this concept for this bill, was something slightly broader. And the example I gave to Rick long ago was, okay, Representative Marsh gets complaints from residents of a park in Ashland, or in between Ashland and Medford, where they're getting, and most of the residents are Latinx farm workers, and they feel like they're getting pushed around by the landlord. And so they want to understand the law. So Representative Marsh sets up a meeting, a Zoom meeting, or yeah, I guess it was Zoom, at which I attended remotely and explained the law for 2 hours and answered questions. That's not legal representation, because I don't have a client. I don't have a legal client. I don't have an agreement with anybody in that group to be their legal client, be their lawyer. And so that would not be covered by this grant. And that's not good, because the goal here is to train, is to bring on a lawyer. We've hired somebody, Samantha Sheehan, to do this work. And it would prevent her from doing that sort of thing. Or, as Angela is aware, there's a marina up the Columbia River that has had a series of issues with fires. And the residents there would like to understand what their rights are. So what I had hoped to do would be to send Samantha Sheehan in person to meet with those residents and discuss their rights and advise them on what they could and couldn't do. They might later determine to hire or retain Samantha. There's no money involved, so they're not hiring. Retain Samantha to sue the landlord or to negotiate with the landlord. But the first step is for her to meet with them and explain their rights. And under the interpretation of the statute by DOJ here, and I can't argue with that anymore, we've worked out a compromise that sort of works, but it would be a lot better if the language said something like legal assistance, including education, advice, and representation. So that's not a big change, but it would include the sort of stuff that I had in mind when I wrote the bill and the coalition introduced the bill. Does that make sense to people? Do you have questions about what I'm talking about?
No, I hear that, and I know the education piece, and guessing it would also tie over to what we've often talked about in this committee as far as the production and creation of legal information documents about a tenant's and owner's rights within the law. And guessing that without that education piece, it might get a little fuzzy if that would qualify as well.
So a lot of what lawyers do is explain to people what the law does or doesn't do. It's not always suing somebody or being in court. That's a small piece of it. Very few matters actually go to court, except for criminal stuff. Civil stuff rarely goes to court. I like to compare this role to Chuck Carpenter's group, MHCO, Manufacturing Community Owners of Oregon. And Chuck has a relationship with 2 lawyers in Portland, Bill Miner and Phil Queren. And they write columns for his newsletter explaining the law. They speak at his annual conference, which is in 2 weeks in Eugene. And they educate landlords about what the law is and how it works. And that's what we need. That's what park and marina residents need, is a lawyer that can do that very same thing. Angela's been working hard on reviving OSTA and getting OSTA into the 21st century. And so it would be great to have Samantha Sheehan in this job, writing articles for the OSTA newsletter that then or hard copy or internet, explain the law to tenants. Whether they're marina tenants or park tenants. So, and under the careful reading of DOJ, that would not be covered.
John, I think it might just be good to set up some time, probably you, Rick and I, and maybe someone from DOJ to get something drafted to amend the current bill to add that stuff in.
That's fine.
I'll
Yes,
reach out.
Great.
Sometime this week.
I'll be gone the last week of October.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any great rush. I mean, the bill drop date is in December.
Yes. So, this would likely be a during session because the bill's been published.
And so with that, would it be helpful to have a motion from this group as far as supporting the inclusion of education from the committee? And the value of that?
I think it would be a value. I'd support that.
So other discussion, Angela, others, Tara? On that? Or Par? Anything from your perspective you'd want to add?
No, it sounds reasonable to me. I can see why DOJ didn't like it as it was written. And the education piece is it's a big thing. Speaking as a manager who attends seminars, and I'll be at the conference at the end of October, those are really extremely helpful in many ways, just besides the information that you get from speakers, interacting with other people doing the same job, a chance to talk with, in this case, Chuck. Yeah, it's a huge, huge piece.
Yeah, really, we don't want to be suing landlords if we can avoid it. It would be a whole lot more efficient and pleasant for both sides for Samantha to be able to call up a landlord and say, we understand you're doing X, you can't do that. Here's the statute. You should look at the statute. If you have questions, call your own lawyer or call your own organization. But really, you need to stop doing that. And that's not, there's no attorney-client relationship there to qualify as legal representation.
And this is Angela, and I guess that's something that I would probably underscore too. I just continue to see it every day that the most vulnerable of park and marina tenants are the ones who have their home up for sale or prospective purchasers of homes. And what happens during this time is that the control of whether or not they get to sell their property and move on to something they can maybe, better afford with lower rents or, whatever the case may be, they're kind of hostages in a way. And so, like, one of the things that came up last week was there was a marina tenant who had their home for sale at my old marina, and the marina landlord saw a car they didn't recognize and ran down to the docks with the prospective purchaser and the real estate agent and said, "Oh, where are you going?" They said, "Oh, we have an appointment to see a home for sale." And the landlord said, "Oh, well, we have this other home on the other side of the marina that I think you'll like a lot better," and continued to basically say all the nice things about this other home. And the buyers didn't even go to the home of that poor tenant who needs to get out of that situation. And, according to the statute, the landlord didn't technically misrepresent the seller's home, because that would be illegal. That would be against the statute, a violation of ORS, but simply drove the prospective purchasers to someone else's house, somewhere else in the marina. And it would be great because there's, at that point, the seller who didn't even get the showing, they're not going to retain an attorney at this point. They just want out. They want out so badly. So having the ability to have somebody just call up a landlord and say, you might want to review this because, you really shouldn't be doing that. Here's the law, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one of many, but I just keep seeing it happen when property is trying to switch hands and the tenants that are trying to get out are so vulnerable. They just can't and don't have the energy or the funds or the power to retain an attorney at that moment. They're just trying to get approval for a purchase.
As well as the nuanced piece of civil law is decided by case law. And if it's a law that's been out there for a long time, there may be a whole bunch of case law. And though people read it one way, the case law may interpret the statute a very different way. And I think that's where folks get often misled in that they read it and they think their interpretation is the interpretation that everyone has, including courts and judges. And that isn't quite, our civil system isn't quite that simple in that. So with that, would someone like to make a motion that we support pursuing amending the contract, John, or was it the statute? I was a little unclear on that.
It's the statute.
Okay.
Statute controls what the contract can cover.
So amend the statute to include the word education under the legal services contract.
I don't think we should specify here what the wording ought to be. I
Okay,
think
sorry.
Alexandra correctly suggested we meet with legislative council and figure out what they LC controls what goes into the bill. No matter how much.
Thank you for that clarification. And so that we support calling a meeting of the key players to pursue a possible amendment to the statute for legal services.
So moved.
Any other discussion? And do we have a second?
Second,
And all in favor? Aye, or raising hands. And I don't know if Tara has a hand or she can pop in there. Yes, there's the hand. Thank you, Tara. And that, and with that, we will have that move forward and report at the next meeting as an agenda item.
So Brian, there was a second part, I think, of my task here, the actual update, the legislative update. And I missed the August meeting, so I don't know whether you all, and I didn't get that far, and I only got that with the minutes. But I think what we need to be aware of is this huge turnover in the 2023 legislature. At this point, it's already going to be 1/3 new members, senators and representatives. And that's without even seeing what happens in the November elections. So there's a significant change, including in leadership. So there's a new speaker, Tina Kotek, who was a huge proponent of affordable housing development, HCS programs, and tenant rights, is gone. She's trying to be governor. And the new speaker is Dan Rayfield from Corvallis. He's not as familiar or supportive, I think, on housing issues. And the other huge change is that the chair of the House Housing Committee, Julie Fahey, representative from West Eugene, who also is a huge proponent of both of those issues, is still in the legislature, but she's now the majority leader. And when you're the majority leader, you spend all of your time trying to get more members of your party elected. So she's stepped down as chair of the House Housing Committee. She's retained a seat on the committee. But the new chair of the House Housing Committee is Representative Maxine Dexter from, I think, Washington County. She's a doctor. So her background is not in housing. Her background is in medicine. She seems to be largely interested in the health aspects of housing. You know, there's a lot of understanding these days that a lack of housing impacts negatively people's health. Direct correlation between evictions and homelessness and health. So that's where she seems to be. The chair of the Senate committee continues, Casey Chama, from East Portland area, and he continues to be interested in cooling. He got a bill passed in the last session promoting cooling because of the number of people who died in the Portland area during the heat wave of the summer of 2021. There's some hiccups there that I think he wants to try to work on in the legislation that passed in 2021. I don't believe that my program is going to introduce any huge legislative stuff, although I think we'll focus on eviction procedure, which may tie into some things that could work well with mediation or not. But it's too early to say what those will be. I don't foresee any major landlord-tenant legislation. There will be some proposed. The thing that will obviously be proposed, although I wouldn't bet on it passing, would be changes to the rent cap in Senate Bill 608 from 2019. The rent cap limits rent increases during any 12-month period to 7% plus CPI. And CPI is measured on an annual basis, and it's announced by the state. The state announced in September earlier that the CPI, Consumer Price Index, increase during the previous 12 months was something like 7%. So that means that the rent cap for 2023, this isn't effective in 2023, is now 14%. That's a lot. And I think a lot of people are freaked out about it. It doesn't mean that all landlords will raise their rents by 14%, but some will. And that scares a lot of people, and some legislators are interested in trying to change that. So I think there will be legislation introduced. I just don't think it's going to pass. I think that there's a sense among the legislators that they're tired of landlord-tenant issues and they want to move on and work on something else. But who knows? A lot depends on who gets elected in November. An example would be that Representative Mark Meek, who's a Democrat in Clackamas County, is challenging Senator Bill Kinnaman, who's a Republican. The outcome of that race could determine a lot. The Republicans also have hopes of regaining control of both houses and the governorship. So the governor race is very close between Kotek and Drazen. And there are some prognosticators who think the Republicans will gain enough seats to get control of the Senate. Right now it's 18-12 Democrats. The House is 37-23 Democrats. So until we see what the results are in November, it's hard to guess what sort of legislative stuff we're going to see in 2023. Alexandra, you got a crystal ball you want to project?
No projections. I'll just say we've been meeting with Representative Dexter on a lot of our different program areas. I will say she is very, very data focused and data driven. That's really kind of the biggest takeaway that we've had from our conversations with her. But overall, she's been kind of learning the agency and learning the issues. She's getting caught up. Beyond that, I don't think anyone really has a crystal ball. I'd love to have a crystal ball as to what the next legislative session is going to look like, but I think it's really up in the air, especially with the governor's race. Yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah.
But if Drazen is elected governor, then you'll probably see a different director at Housing and Community Services.
That is a possibility.
And that made a lot of difference in terms of staff. I don't think it'll change dramatically if Kotek is elected, although I think she'll probably work more closely with the department than Cape Brown has. So
Mhm.
there's just a lot.
We got a lot up in the air right now.
Yeah.
And of course, as an agency, we are waiting. We've submitted our agency request budget. We submitted that at, with 2 hours to go, 2 hours before the deadline, which is a huge accomplishment for us, considering the size of that document. And, now we have our conversations with LFO, CFO regarding those projections. And then, of course, we were going to have to wait until January, probably late January, for a governor's recommended budget.
Right, so the actual recommended budget that comes, legislature will come from either Kotek or Drazen, not from Cape Brown. So the budget right now is Cape Brown's budget. And then frankly, a lot of people think that the legislature just ignores the governor's budget anyway. And really it's Ways and Means that does the budget. And
Legislative approved budgets and governor's recommended budgets do not have to be the same.
Yeah.
And I was in Salem yesterday for a training. It was my first physical in-person meeting in Salem in 2.5 years. And I walked through the building where Housing and Community Services offices are located, just for nostalgic sake. And I went over to the Veterans Affairs building, and there's HCS offices there now. So HCS has grown by a lot in the last 2 years.
We're going to be around 400 people when we're full, or when we're done with our hiring. I think we're currently at 327 or something like that. It's absolutely massive. And we're trying to consolidate to one building. Parks left some space in our current building. And so hopefully we won't take up part of veterans now too. Plus the Portland office. We're all over the place now. We've got so many more employees. A lot of them also on this team.
Yeah.
This team
So
is really stepped up.
a lot of change for HCS, a new director, and a lot of new staff. It's a lot of new programs, a lot of new money. So that's the legislative update.
Great, yeah, thank you. Any questions from the members specific? For Alexandria or John? And if not, we can just move right into the legislative report, which sounds like may have been a small piece of everything you've been focusing on, but yet another good one. So Alexandria, anything?
I dropped that in the chat during my initial legislative update. So thank you all for all of your feedback on that report that got submitted to the House Committee on Housing and the sponsors of the original bill, which I believe is Lloyd Przansky and Julie Fahey, if I'm correct. It's been a while since this was turned in. So there is that final report. Let me know if any of you have any questions. A lot of this is information that's come from Rick and from Ken and, the rest of the program staff and filtered through you guys. And I think that's really all we have. Next report is due in 2024. So this is a report that's due every 2 years.
Great.
And actually, the sponsors of 586 were Przansky, Senator Przansky from Eugene, and Alyssa Kenny Geyer, who is now enjoying life in Santa Fe.
Yes. I knew it wasn't Fahey, but I wasn't quite sure.
Okay, and that takes us down to the CDRC operational grant update. And as everyone is aware, this was a grant that Rick was very much championing in that, and the CDRCs are very appreciative, and Tara may have more comment as president of Resolutions Oregon, which is the 15 centers around the state, and where that's at, and any to bring the group up to speed.
Yeah, good news. I've been getting copies of amendments finally going out for execution. So everyone should be receiving a copy of the amendment for them to sign and get back to us so that we can start getting some money out. So we will schedule a meeting with those who'd be creating the invoices and sending them out to us, and just to share how we'll be processing that, who will be processing that. Judy will be processing those particular amendment grants, funds, and so we'll put together just a quick little meeting just to kind of go over the different document. It'll be a different from the original grant because we want to make sure we keep those funds. It's more of an audit thing for us that we need two different invoices so that, because they are separate funds in the back office, they're separate funds, in the front they're the same. So it's more for us than for anybody else as far as documenting and moving forward. But circling back around, good news is that we're at a DOJ review, and our procurement is in the process of getting the rest of the amendments out to everyone in order to get them signed. We also had some additional CDRCs originally weren't able to take advantage of it, but we are having more CDRCs actually come on board with that. So that's exciting too, so that everyone else will be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Carla? I see a finger.
Yeah, no, I already sent, because you sent out the ones that have already been executed, the grants that have been executed, so that I already set up a meeting. I sent a request for a meeting for the 4, said to go over the invoices so that they could start invoicing for those. And I included Sean and Judy in that. So we've already got that set up for next week.
Perfect.
And with that, just so folks know, one of the things that came up through the COVID process is historically those service grants for the CDRCs were done on a fee for service. So you got X number of dollars for for a court connected case or a community case. And with COVID, that all those cases pretty much stopped for a period of time. And with that, stopped the ability for centers to be able to invoice. And with that, recognized, and when Rick came on board, recognized that there was a real need to shore up the past pieces, as well as with insurance requirements increasing in that. So they were able to get this one-time grant through for the CDRCs to help with those operational expenses. And I say the feedback has been extremely positive and grateful. So thanks for all that hard work on the backside, Rick, on behalf of the CDRC.
It's been a team effort. I'd like to take all the applause on it, but I tell you, we have an amazing team. Without everyone's help on that, it would have been impossible. But we have an amazing team that I think this year is going to be probably one of our best years as far as getting things done. So I'm excited.
It's great to see the number of staff increase from when it was Ken, and now you have a much bigger staff in that. And
yeah, but that's kind of it's brief, but it's all good news. Is Brian stuck or is it me?
Oh, no, I think he froze.
Okay, he froze. Okay.
Yeah, he hasn't blinked.
Okay. I thought it was me for a minute.
I think, I'll add while Brian's coming out of his frozen state. I just want to add a big thank you. I'll say that the centers are often, like a lot of nonprofits and local government organizations, doing more with less. And it's hard to find funding just to keep the doors open, right? Just to keep operations moving. And so we're very appreciative of these extra funds so that it ensures we can keep our doors open, get our folks more training, get more people to the table, and then provide the best services that we can. So And Rick, I think I heard you say more centers are able to participate now too, because the big hiccup was the new insurance requirements, the new minimums were really expensive for some of the nonprofits. So I'm glad to hear that more centers are able to engage in the services too.
Yeah, and that was good news to hear.
Is
Yeah,
Brian back?
And I think Brian dropped off completely. Where are we on the agenda, Judy? I think we could probably pull that down, or whoever put that up. I'm not sure if Judy did or John did.
We are going on number 7, the nominations and results.
Oh, yeah, and I can address that. Well, the good news is that our the nominations were there weren't any new ones. Actually, they were just really we're excited to have Brian and Tara to continue. So Brian and Tara will continue on for another season, we'll say. And so we appreciate all your hard work and just all you do for us.
Thank you.
But again, the good news, but brief. John, did you post this and can pull it down, or is this Judy?
What is it? The agenda?
No, that's the
Minutes.
the minutes.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah. I asked
Sorry.
her to be posted.
No, I
didn't.
just was wondering. Thank you.
Just as an aside, Rick, we talked about this before, about inviting other members of the CDRCs to attend these meetings, because not everyone comes or is in attendance, and it kind of puts them into the loop. And we don't have that many guests anyway. But like, for instance, Miles, I talked with Miles the other day. He's never been to a DRAC meeting, and there are probably other members of the CDRC as well. And so maybe consider inviting people that want to attend just for their own edification, whatever.
Yeah, I personally don't have a problem. I think we need to make sure that the committee's okay with that. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
It sounds good to me.
Yeah. Did we lose Brian altogether? I don't see
Kind of
him.
looks that way.
Yeah, okay. And there's a Samsung. Is that Brian or is that someone else? A phone? I'm not sure who that is.
I thought it was Brian. I admitted him in just a few minutes ago.
Oh, okay, it could be Brian.
He's muted, so if it is
Okay.
Brian.
Yeah. Brian, are you? Did you dial in, Brian? I'll just ask the question.
I just let Brian in. Hang on.
Okay. Oh, now he's off. No, the Samsung's still there.
Sorry about that. Our internet and phones went down briefly.
Ah, were you on the Samsung? Is
I
that?
was.
Oh, okay.
So
Thank
I
you.
decided, yeah. Left that, so.
Let's
What
see.
is that?
So I think we finished. Oh, and then I was on number 7, letting everyone know that both you and Tara were renominated as chair and co-chair. So just wanted to thank you for your hard work so far. Is he down again?
Oh, yeah.
MMCR data.
I only caught half of that.
Oh, I'm not sure our internet isn't going back down again.
He mentioned MMCRC data.
Okay. Yeah, in fact, we had, Ken, that was, the updates that you were working on with Willie, and we want a little bit more detail on it, but you just, can you bring that up, Ken, at all?
I don't know if I can bring it up or not, but
Well, we can definitely send it out then.
yeah, I was going to send it out, but let me see if I can find one.
Yeah, if not, you could just talk about it for a little bit.
Oh, I mean, it's the same report that was defined, only it's broken out by CDRC. So they'll get an individual for their territory. Let me see if I can bring this thing up. And now my computer is flashing bad copy or bad transmission.
The joys.
First world problems, right?
Yeah. It's let me see if I've got one. No, it's not. Did that bring it up?
There you go.
There
Yes.
it is.
Okay. And actually, this is the resolve report, I believe. But this is the identical report that was a high-level summary that was initially offered. And we asked Willie to break it out by CDRC. So we haven't had a chance to get with Willie to do too much more discussions. He's had some family issues. But this is what every CDRC will get. And of course, Rick will have a summary.
Yeah, because I think part of that original request was to get a sense of, we could compare it against our actual casework to see if there was missing data, and other pieces is where it got asked to be by the CDRCs as well. And it sounds like from what Alexandria shared, there's going to be a more important drive on getting this information if data is a big contributor to the new housing chair.
So, that was a relatively straightforward request, and he fulfilled it.
And is that going to be sent out to all the centers, or is the complete report going to be something that can get added to the minutes, or?
Well, I guess that's to be decided. We've never published individual reports in the past. We've always had them, but we always put out a summary. So we could send them out, as a group, so everyone sees what everyone's activity is and the summary, or you can do it, piecemeal.
Yeah, I think actually probably both would be helpful, because one of the hard things of the Qualtrics process is once you put it in, we don't get anything back to know if it was received and cumulatively how those cases are reported, especially on the what used to be called the mediator report, or the one that has that information. And one of my curiosities with this, have you been able to get those letters out in a timely manner with the way you're receiving the data coming into Qualtrics, as far as the letters of compliance?
Well, these are quarterly reports, so my understanding is that these are quarterly reports that we're talking about.
Correct, and being that
Correct.
you're also pulling the data to get those letters out to participants. Is that working, I guess, is my question. Are you getting that information in a timely way to send out the letters from your office that they complied with the mandatory mediation or did not comply with the mandatory mediation.
Now, my understanding on that is that there was only a letter for non-compliance. We've never issued a letter to anyone, whether it complied or not complied. That was my understanding of that. Tell me if I'm wrong, Rick, but it was on an exception basis that we would send a letter if someone didn't comply.
Yeah, that's the process currently. We don't send out an email saying that you are, or a letter saying you are complying.
And with that, has that process been working and you've been able to get those letters out to folks, or?
We haven't had really anybody firmly, refuse to cooperate. We've had some brushes where we had to verify the requirements, but we haven't had the form is on the website, but we haven't had anyone actually refuse to cooperate.
So what I'm hearing is there haven't been any letters needed.
No, we haven't.
sent out.
No, we haven't had an occurrence where we would require it.
Well, I hear what you're saying too, Brian, that what we can do is we can have quarterly, as reports are being sent in, we can definitely send a report back out to the different CDRCs, basically verifying what they sent. And if we are missing something, they could say, oh, by the way, we have this also, or but it'll be definitely the report would be a report for the previous quarter, but that way at least it verifies the information they send out, so that it's they're comfortable that the information we're receiving is the information we're sending. Is that what you're trying to allude to as far as sending out these reports?
Yeah, and just so there's a cross check. So if we know the data is coming in to be able to paint the picture, like I said, it was some of that data was included in the report that Alexandria created as far as number of cases and sessions and that piece. And so that we're able to make sure everyone is getting the numbers in. So if we see an increase in other pieces, we have some confidence in those numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken can get that information and then just send it out quarterly. That way, it's more of that trust but verify thing to make sure that we're getting the correct information out. And as we move forward, we can always then put out a report, if someone requests something, so that we're confident of our information and our data that we're receiving.
Yeah, and I think it was, identified in that report as far as people being aware and utilizing the services. So that's where this report definitely has an impact on that piece to say, oh yeah, we're getting more requests. Okay, what are we doing right? Or, oh gee, requests are staying flat. What needs to be done to improve participation? So I guess a little bit of that wanting to be driven and guided by the data versus our personal hypothesis and stories.
And honestly, I believe in fact, I'm confident that the previous report is a little scarce, just because of the environment and where we were with COVID and such. But I believe things are picking up again, and so the reports will be more, we'll have a lot more data on it, which is good news.
Yeah, no, that's more, like I said, the one, are you getting the data, and is that the data gathering process working?
Yeah, we'll definitely get that updated. And again, once these funds go out, I think it'll also help the mediation process as well.
Yeah. Okay. And other items for the good of the order?
So I wanted to Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, so I had said that I would contact Chuck Carpenter about someone possibly east of the mountains who could be part of this committee. Okay, so I sent an email out. Chuck was on vacation, et cetera, so waited a time. I get a response from Chuck. Now Chuck knows I'm on this committee. He knows that I'm an on-site manager for the Par Acres here in Woodburn, and yet he completely, and I'm going to fault myself for how I wrote it. He read it as this committee wanting somebody to leave their job in Eastern Oregon and come be a full-time position somewhere over here. It's just like a complete misreading, and he had a strong negative response. And I just felt like Chuck and I were ships passing in the night. Okay. And I've had conversations with Chuck for 18 years, and I've never had the feeling of that we were ships passing in the night until this point. So I don't know what happened there. I had also said something about a suggestion for fall conference, which was maybe having someone like Neighbor to Neighbor in Salem, Oregon, who we use when we do mediation, coming in and doing a presentation, and maybe somebody from this committee. And Chuck just, and I have made suggestions to Chuck in the past, and he has liked them, and he's actually had people come in based on some ideas I've given him, and I've done a presentation at fall conference. But this time everything was no. And I just have never gotten that from Chuck before. So I just responded and said I was only talking about a volunteer position, and I just let it go. And I'm going to see him in a few weeks, and I'm going to revisit this in person, because I don't know if he was having a bad day, but the miss on the communication was like 100%. And I will grant you that I'm a good one for starting in the middle of a conversation rather than the beginning, not being real linear. But still, I've never had such a huge miss before with Chuck. I'm going to try again.
no, I appreciate that, Pat. And that's my kind of guess, that it may have just been a one-off, and I think you're spot on in following up with that is in person when you see him at the conference, because I know he's been an avid supporter of the process and other pieces, though he comes from a different focus and had
Yeah,
with him
he's
on
such a-
panels and other things. So that's kind of my guess in that. So I appreciate you following up and circling back, and is something that we can report at our December meeting then.
Thanks for trying, Pat.
Thank you.
Chuck does not like himself participating in these sorts of things. And he doesn't like state agencies. Just sort of a gut thing that it's not rational, and he knows it. But so keep trying.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, and I'm also, after your conversation, feel free, and I would be more than happy to have a follow-up conversation if that's helpful, or other pieces.
Oh, yeah. I'll let you know how the fall, my conversation with him goes in a couple of weeks. I always have a conversation with him at fall conference, usually the second day when things are a little more relaxed and settled. And so I'm planning on that.
Great.
And I'll let you know how that goes.
Take him out for a glass of wine.
Yes, in that. And I guess just one other housekeeping one, I will not be present for the December meeting. I'm going to be on vacation at that period. And wanted to make sure Tara would be available for that meeting.
Yes, I'll be available to take the reins.
Great, thank you, as always in that. Other things for the good of the order? If not, we can get on with our days, and sorry about the tech issues. And
Thank you.
And before folks sign off, if you haven't downloaded the report, make sure to do that as it's in the chat.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
So
Bye-bye.
I think Carla had a question. Carla,
Oh, maybe she'll email us.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys have a good
Okay.
day.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.
I